Live streaming is on.
Okay, welcome everybody to this edition of the Jitsi Community Call. We've got a limited set of Jitsi team members here today because many people are on a holiday, but we wanted to do give at least a little update for the people who are here, and anybody who has questions, at least make an attempt to answer those. So I just wanted to give a little update on the new bridge stuff. We merged the new bridge code into master a couple weeks ago. I think we announced that on a previous call. We've deployed new bridge to beta.meet.jit.si to do some testing. And we've got a fairly short list of blockers before we merge to meet Jitsi at this point, which is what we're kind of considering the stable benchmark for the new bridge. So we're working on those and making progress, and we'll update when we actually do that deploy, but we haven't done that yet, so we're still working on it. Boris, anything you want to add, or any other team members who want to chime in? Go ahead, and then we can open up to questions.
I don't have anything.
Okay. Since, like I said, we don't have a lot of people from the team today, I think that might be it for an update. So, any questions from anybody?
Hi, this is Paul. How's it going?
Hey, Paul.
So just a couple, quick questions. We're moving forward with implementing audio recording, or eventually audio and video recording, kind of replacing the audio recorder RTP impl with, but getting it to work on the new bridge. I think so far it's going okay. So we were able to kind of merge everything and kind of get general functionality. Just a couple quick things I just wanted to confirm. So one of the things that we were doing, this is a little bit outside the recording functionality. We had a custom filter in the audio channel. So it was I think RTP will write, or I think that's right, RTP translator will write. Which is just like a interface method that's, I think, used or an abstract class method for RTP channel. So just want to confirm that we should be using, I think it's wants in the new world.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Wants is the equivalent of that.
Okay, great. Okay, and so per your recommendation, and thanks again for all your help with the PCAP writer and using that as a general guide for the recorder. So given that our current audio recorder RTP input lives in Video Bridge, first off, where is the sort of recommended approach to move this into the new RTP library, or I guess our general question is where does this fit in? I guess library and just general flow. So we're starting with just tests to get this to work, but as far as
well, I'm assuming you mean maybe the JMT, the Jitsi Media Transform lib, not the RTP one, because I think that
Sorry. Yeah.
So so the core of the pipeline is there, so I think that does make sense. I'm probably maybe what you're thinking, and I'd agree with, is
hello.
He was driving, so he may have dropped off. Hopefully he'll come back. There he is. We see you, Brian, but you're still muted.
Okay. Sorry about that. So I do think JMT, but now if you're what we don't support right now is the ability to like dynamically inject a node into the pipeline. So the bridge couldn't dynamically inject something into kind of that core pipeline within the transceiver. But what you could do is you could implement it in Jitsi Media Transform and have it turned off, say, and basically in an off state, it's basically a no op, and then have the bridge turn it on. So you could always have this node that's there and does nothing until the bridge goes in and turn it on. I think that would probably be, in its current state at least, that would be the best way to do it. I mean, I haven't had a need to kind of support this dynamic node injection.
Right.
So there's no API to do that currently, but you could go about doing it that way.
I see. So it's almost like it would just, we would have some sort of state that would effectively enable or disable it. You mean, right? Like,
right.
Got it.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, that does make sense. Okay. Yeah, that sounds great. So, I think those are two big questions. And so, I think over the next week, we should probably have something that, is, like I said, we're starting with the test, which I think, and yeah, this is so much easier to test. It's so much more testable. I mean, I think it's a huge positive change. I mean, I think, and you guys spent a lot of time working on this, so I think it's really great. It takes a little time, obviously, to have to refactor our stuff, but I think it's going to be so much cleaner, so much less implicit. We're not sad to see JMF go away.
Great. I'm glad to hear that. And one thing I wanted to say that I thought of when I was playing on the community forum the other day is that, looking at the original post, I wanted to make sure that, I had mentioned putting these recorder nodes, I said after the decrypt, which I think is technically true, but it occurred to me that you will want to make sure, especially for video, that you do the node after things like RTX termination. That way you won't have to handle RTX in your recorder. You can rely on the node that's already transforming an RTX packet to look like a normal video packet.
I see.
So that'll make your life a bit easier.
Okay. Yeah. There's no downside of being farther downstream, right? Like, I mean, we should probably put it as far downstream so that we have to do it.
Yeah, you will. I mean, at some point, if you go after the audio video split, you'll obviously need it in two places instead of one. I think you'll have to do it that way, because otherwise you'll have to deal with RTX on your own, stuff like RTX on your own. But I don't think that should be necessarily a bad thing, that you'll have separate things pumping in the audio and video, because at that point they can be pretty dumb anyways. They're just dealing with an RTP media packet. You'll just have to have it in two places.
Right.
And you won't have, there's only one thread that's going to be moving through a single receive pipeline anyway, so you won't be getting packets from both those places for the most part. On the receive side, with you won't have that, so you won't have a problem.
So if they're separate though, would we have to then, how would we synchronize them, like audio and video streams? Or
well, I was assuming you were going to have to be doing that separately anyways for, with timestamps, if you're talking about that, but.
Yes. I guess like an RTCP, which is what the old recorder is doing.
Yeah. But you actually won't be, the fact that you have two nodes doing it from two places won't, from at least a timing, I'm going on another bridge, but at least a timing perspective won't be that different, because there's only one thread handling those incoming packets as they come in anyway. So it's kind of the same. They'd be written to your recorder thing in the same order as if you had a node in one place anyway, is what I mean.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I think that makes sense. Cool. Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for your help. But we'll post on the boards over the next few days if we run into any issues. But that helps a lot.
Okay, cool.
I don't know if you guys, I know you had a discussion on the forums, and I don't know how far ahead you are, but I'm wondering, have you considered implementing it instead of at the node level, at the endpoint level, and having a new endpoint in the bridge or something equivalent that receives all the packets? This would require no changes to the media library, the media transfer.
Oh, wait, what do you mean by that? You mean as a separate kind of like the way as a separate module, like Jitsi would be, or do you mean?
No, it would be still in the bridge, but instead of plugging into the received trees of the different endpoints, you would plug into the conference and receive all packets for the conference.
Oh, interesting. So where would that be? Like, where would the input point to that be? Like at the actual endpoint, like the endpoint class?
I think that would. Sorry, Brian, go ahead.
I was going to say, yeah, I think Boris is talking about making like a pseudo endpoint instance that you would dynamically add to the conference on the bridge itself. And this would be like a recorder. So there's abstract endpoint, and then you would implement like a recorder endpoint. And there's an input to that, which is, there's once, and then there's basically send RTP, and you'd be hooking into other things. But Boris, it might be a little trickier to tap into the SRs for the incoming media for sync there. But I guess we do forward them. So
yeah,
no, we're not. We don't forward there's some rewriting we do there, I think.
I think
but
that's
I guess that should still be okay.
That's the endpoint bitrate controller does the rewriting, if I remember. But
okay.
So conference has this method called handle incoming packet, and that's the main entry point. That's where packets from all endpoints end up.
Oh, I see.
So you can either do something there or do an actual pseudo endpoint, as Brian suggested. These are just two other options.
So what is the downside of doing something at the handle incoming packet level in conference? Like, do we not have anything? Do we not have access to certain lower level details, or is it basically the same?
I think I'm not sure I entirely know, and again, I can't remember. I don't know if there's anything other than SRs that's needed. And you would, you have to do like a whole new, basically like fake endpoint thing. There might be some annoying things you might have to do to make your endpoint class look like an endpoint in the ways that it needs to fulfill that API, and maybe not look like it in other ways because you don't want it showing up. But that's probably not too bad. But I'm not sure.
Okay. Like, would we still extend abstract endpoint, or are there things in there?
I think you'd extract, you'd extend that. Like, I don't know if the bridge would ever be unhappy trying to get streams out of, like, you'd have no signaled send streams, and wouldn't be announced the signaling. I don't know off the top of my head everything, like, it's what that implementation might look like, but it does seem like it should be feasible. It's kind of taking, I don't know if there's, doing the incoming pipeline thing is a bit more of a distributed approach, right? You're handling all the receive streams at one piece and right, kind of handling it there. I don't know if it might be simpler to do that, where you can make some assumptions about some incoming media and the way you do jitter buffering or not. You have a bunch of small ones rather than a big one, so to speak, that's handling all of the streams, for example. But it's unclear to me whether or not that would make it easier because it's a bunch of smaller problems, or if handling a big problem means you could do it all in one place, and maybe something about that might be simpler. I'm just not sure.
Okay. Maybe we'll do a few tests. I mean, either it seems like it would be a little simpler to do it at sort of a higher layer. But I'm just curious, there must be some I guess we would have a little less flexibility, maybe, versus, but at the same time, we wouldn't, maybe handling, maybe consolidating certain things, or would maybe be a little simpler. But maybe it
Yeah.
really doesn't make that big of a difference. Yeah, it's hard to see what the trade-offs would be. It kind of
Yeah.
seemed.
It would be, and it would be nice. It would be more focused in the bridge, which could be nice. If you guys, and like turning it on and off, it's rather than having that kind of always presence there. That's just a no op. This would be much more dynamic in terms of like you add this recorder endpoint to a conference or remove it when you wanted to turn things on and off, rather than toggling some state.
Right. Okay.
One thing to have in mind is that multiple threads code this at the same time. So you would have to handle this.
We'd have to deal with synchronization more, I guess, in the conference.
Yes.
There. Yeah, I see. Yeah. So maybe going with the other approach would be a little bit more performant and less risky, because we could just be a little bit more less worried about threading and concurrency, but there's probably a little more complexity and it's a little more low level, and dealing with the dynamic sort of behavioral stuff would be harder, versus in this other model, it's maybe a little bit more aggregated or consolidated together, but now we may run into performance issues and or concurrency problems. Is that maybe the main trade-off?
Yeah, and you might find also that the endpoint thing, I mean, another potential advantage of that is it's probably not that I would expect the pipeline to change in a way, like your dependency on the pipeline specifically is not very deep. You're just relying on packets coming through. But this might be, maybe doing it this endpoint way would be a bit more isolated, in the sense that as long as you're only relying on kind of an endpoint API and receiving packets, and then maybe there's something there that'd be easier to maintain, more robust against changes in the bridge and JMT. Like that is a potential advantage of that way.
I see. Okay. Yeah, that's yeah, thanks for that. It's let's think about it. And either way, I'll post kind of the direction that we take on the community boards. And yeah, if you discover anything else, anything we should factor in into this decision, then yeah, let me know, because it'll be good to consider.
Cool.
Thanks a lot.
Anybody else? Okay, I think we'll call it then. And thanks everyone for coming, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Cool. Thanks everybody. Thanks again.
Thanks, everyone.